A couple of weeks ago, I was invited to lead a discussion on career with some undergraduate students of the Arts and Science program at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, of which I'm an alumni. And so I thought I'd share a summary of that talk with you. It's geared towards an undergrad audience, but I'm hoping that there are some things of use to others. I've really enjoyed over the years providing formal and informal career coaching and feedback to people, and so hopefully there's something here that would be of use to you. As undergrads, and also at other stages in our life, there's always this question, so what are you planning to do? What are you going to do? You know, and I think there's pressure that we put upon ourselves, or expectations we have of ourselves, expectations that we may feel from friends and family to have this great and sexy and perfect answer to that question. And my first caution or advice to this group of undergrads was to not worry so much about having an answer. You might indeed have some very clear career goals at an early stage in your life, and that's fine. That's okay. But on the other hand, I think there's also many of us who have a bit of a journey rather than having certainty. And so my first thought to this group was be okay, be open to the idea of a journey where there's various experiences, you try things, you'll get feedback, you'll learn things. There'll be chance, random events that occur as well on that journey. And so it's quite uncertain, this journey. And there'll be other times when there's greater and greater certainty as well. So there's both, and to embrace both of those was my advice, and is my advice. The second is, particularly as undergrads in a general program like the Arts and Science program, is to take advantage of that opportunity to have an education, to build an education that is a great foundation for learning later. It's a cliche, but I think it's quite true. That, you know, learning how to learn, learning how to appreciate culture and ideas, and so forth. There'll be a time and place for vocation and vocational training. It has its role as well, but to recognize, if you're lucky enough to be in a situation to focus on education rather than vocation, I think is fantastic, and is not to be, I think, rushed over. The word career, I think, is somewhat problematic. There's, I think, a bit of a bias around traditionally jobs that were seen as worthy of the word career, that they were maybe professional. It's always seemed to me odd that you could have a career in medicine, but you wouldn't have necessarily a career as a master carpenter. Although I think you're both equally interesting and difficult in their own way and satisfying in their own way. So I would encourage people to have a very broad definition of career and not sort of limited to the traditional idea of professional career. And I think that's so important today now, because jobs and work is changing so much that I think we need to be very flexible in our thinking about career. Knowing yourself, I think, is really the key to career development and having a career that you enjoy, if you have that opportunity. It's a combination, a function of receptivity and experiences. So receptivity to insights about yourself, so self-reflection, as well as receptivity to feedback from others around you. And experiences, the more you can place yourself in a diversity of situation, a diversity of culture, diversity of people, styles, then I think those are all experiences that will inform you as to how you react to those things, and it will change how you view things. So I think knowing yourself and developing that self-awareness is very important. When I've had the chance to take instruments like Myers-Briggs or Innovation Styles or Birkman and others. I've always found it very valuable. So I would encourage people to actively seek out those opportunities, whether it's through counseling, at a school, through your employer, what have you. Some of these might be online, perhaps. So I think they are lenses to help with getting rid of some of the blind spots we may have about ourselves. And I've also used these in team settings. I've shared this with team members, with peers, with subordinates to help communicate my preferences and for problem solving, for communication and so forth, and vice versa. In my experience, there are, I think, 5 kinds of careers, or maybe more accurately, 5 ways that we can satisfy our egos. So for example, one way, or one kind of ego is drawn towards the accumulation of money, wealth, title, for example. And so that's going to take you down a certain career direction in order to try to satisfy that desire, that ego desire that's through money and wealth and title. Quite different, though, are people who are drawn towards or are satisfied in building an organization. It might be a startup, it might be building a unit within an existing organization, but it's the pride of building that team out, and in its most basic form, it's how many people did I attract to my team over time. Quite different is the satisfaction of mastering a challenging craft or skill and using that skill to solve puzzles, problems. And the challenge and variety of these puzzles, if you will, is what's satisfying to that kind of ego. Interestingly, I think many people who are very good at a particular skill, for example, might create a startup because they've invented something, if you will, but they're not really motivated by the building of an organization. So that's where you get this tension between they want to be an inventor, they want to be a problem solver, but they're now drawn into this having to build an organization, and they're not really liking that or good at that. So that's what you sometimes see with very smart puzzle solvers who then move into building a business, and the tension that exists there between those two modes. The fourth is developing others, teaching others, coaching others, mentoring others. That can be immensely satisfying to certain people. And then finally, Jane Jacobs, in her book, Systems of Survival, talked about people who are oriented towards a commercial sphere, and those that she called guardians. And so I think that is the fifth area where people are really drawn towards service in that sense. So soldiers, first responders, police officers, people who are, their ego gratification is, among other things, just that honorable service to the community, and they get a lot of reward from that, that service. So in my experience, 5 ways of thinking about not necessarily jobs or careers, but 5 modes of ego gratification, if you will, that if you're lucky, you know yourself well enough and honestly enough that you know, well, here's what's driving me, and therefore create a career that meets that ego need. The question of passion: should you go into a career for which you have passion? Well, I think it's important, but I really like the way Cal Newport thinks about it, which is that, yes, you might have this pre-existing, top-down passion that animates your career decisions. And that's, I think that probably does occur, and that's fine. But he also I think, advocates for a more emergent, bottom-up development of a passion through this journey, and you might have the opportunity to exercise and develop a skill that you find you are quite interested in and good enough at that it provides this positive feedback and encouragement to you, and you delve further into it, and a passion then grows out of it. So I think this idea of being open to emergent passion as opposed to trying to find this passion from day one, I think is good advice, if I'm reading Cal Newport correctly on that. He also talks about building a rare and valuable skill. So quite aside from the issue of passion, is with whatever else you do, you need to do that in order to have the foundation for a successful career, because without that rare and valuable skill, many other things become difficult, like getting reasonable compensation for that. So his book, I think, really is addressing that. So good they can't ignore you, which I would encourage people to take a look at. The image of the T skill set, the capital T, is one that I personally keep in my own mind and try to communicate to others. The idea of, yes, you want to develop breadth, but also this rare and valuable skill, this spike, this speciality, this calling card that you're really good at and is a focus for you, I think is very important. Because if you just have the broad but thin layer of knowledge and no area of expertise in something rare and valuable, then I think, again, careers and career discussions are very problematic until you develop that. Adam Grant in the New York Times wrote, I think, a very interesting article titled "Good News for Young Strivers: Networking is Overrated," and I think he's echoing this point around, well, building a powerful network doesn't require you to be an expert at networking, he says. It just requires you to be an expert at something. And if you do great work, those connections will be easier to make. So again, this idea of a rare and valuable skill. A question like, what do the United States Marine Corp, a non-government disaster relief agency, a tech startup, and say a bank, what do they have in common? And point one is, there's many things they all have to do, like recruit, leadership development, data analysis, project management, change management, communications, and so forth. And so I think very often there's a tendency to look at organizations and sectors for how they're different, but I would encourage people thinking about career to focus on some common elements that cut across these sectors. So have a transferable skill focus as well as a vertical sector or organization focus. I also think that there is a tendency to typecast certain sectors with a broad brush. So, healthcare is great or healthcare is not great. Banking is great, banking is not great. And the fact of the matter is that within any of those sectors, like healthcare, there's going to be big differences between organizations. Even within a single organization, there'll be big differences between this department and that department, this region and that region, because of the nature of the leadership in those regions and departments. So be cautious in stereotyping these verticals and think about how to develop transferable horizontal skills as well. So just a quick summary of the talk to the undergrad students for McMaster's Arts and Science program.